The crash of the stainless steel tray against the counter nearly drowned out the impatient voice of the customer who had been tapping his fingers on the Formica tabletop for what felt like an eternity. "Miss, I've been waiting for 20 minutes. Are you even listening to me?" The harsh words cut through the already tense atmosphere of the diner, where the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently and the smell of burnt coffee and grease hung heavy in the air. "Before we begin the story, I want you to drop a comment and tell us where you're from and which city you're watching our videos from. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what you would do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every single comment. Let's begin." I swallowed hard, forcing a tired smile that felt foreign on my face after working a double shift that had stretched well past midnight. My fingers trembled slightly as I slid the plate of overcooked eggs and rubbery bacon across the sticky surface toward the disgruntled customer. My arms ached from carrying stacks of dishes all day, and my back felt like it was on fire, the familiar ache of muscle fatigue that had become my constant companion. The sweat sticking to my uniform clung like glue, and I could smell the mixture of industrial cleaning chemicals and cooking oil that seemed permanently embedded in the fabric. Double shifts at the diner weren't glamorous, but they paid the bills, or at least they were supposed to. Every morning I woke up at dawn, and every night collapsed into bed exhausted, telling myself that this was temporary, that someday things would get better. But as the months turned into years, that someday felt further and further away. By the time I finally clocked out, the sky was dark, painted in deep purples and blacks that signaled another sleepless night ahead. My shoes squished with sweat as I dragged myself down the familiar block, each step heavier than the last. All I could think about was unlocking the front door to my little house, showering off the grease smell that seemed to penetrate my very pores, and collapsing into the comfort of my own bed where I could finally let my guard down. But when I reached the street corner, I froze. The porch light was off, something that immediately set my nerves on edge because I always left it on. The curtains that I had hung myself, simple white shears that had been a small attempt to make the place feel like home, were missing, leaving the windows bare and accusing. And parked in my driveway, which should have been empty except for my beat-up Honda Civic, sat a massive moving truck with its tailgate open, men tossing furniture inside like it was nothing more than scrap wood. "What the hell?" My voice cracked as I dropped my bag and ran forward, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. One of the movers, a burly man with a beard stained with what looked like coffee, barely looked up from his work. "You the tenant?" he asked without much interest, continuing to load a lamp that had belonged to my grandmother. "Orders from the owners. House sold this morning. Everything's being cleared." My heart slammed so hard I couldn't breathe, the words echoing in my head like a death knell. "Impossible. This is my house. My name is on the..." Before I could finish my protest, I heard laughter, light, sharp, and cutting through the night, like a blade. It was a sound I knew all too well, one that had haunted my childhood and followed me into adulthood. I turned slowly, dreading what I would see but knowing I had to face it anyway. There she was, my sister Amanda, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, that same smirk plastered on her perfect face that she'd worn since we were children. She looked exactly like she always did, impeccably dressed, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, as if she were attending some exclusive social event rather than standing in front of a house that was being stripped bare. "Well," she drawled, tilting her head like she was enjoying a private joke that only she understood. "I guess someone finally told you." I staggered toward her, every muscle in my body trembling with a mixture of exhaustion, confusion, and growing anger. The weight of the day pressed down on me like a physical force, but I forced myself to stay upright. "What did you do? Why is my house being emptied?" Amanda didn't even blink, didn't show a trace of the guilt or remorse that I felt should accompany betraying your own sister. She leaned closer, her expensive perfume hitting me like poison, a stark contrast to the smell of industrial cleaning supplies that clung to my uniform. "Mom and Dad sold it. Signed everything over to fund Kyle's trip to Europe. You know something worthwhile. He deserved it more than you." Her words burned like acid, each syllable a reminder of years of being treated as less than, of being invisible in my own family. The irony wasn't lost on me that they had sold my house, the one place where I had tried to create something that was entirely mine, without even bothering to tell me. My brother, the golden boy, the one who had never worked a day in his life, who had flunked out of college twice and still received praise for finding himself while I worked myself to the bone just to survive. And me, I'd been killing myself with double shifts, holding everything together, trying to make ends meet while they lived their comfortable lives, funded by whatever financial support system they had always enjoyed. I felt my lips curve into a slow, sharp smile that didn't match the chaos swirling in my chest. It was the kind of smile that promised consequences, that hinted at secrets they didn't know I possessed. Amanda's perfectly plucked eyebrows lifted in confusion. She thought she'd crushed me, thought I would beg, cry, maybe throw a scene like I had when I was younger and more vulnerable. She expected me to collapse into the role she had always assigned me, that of the weak, dependent sister who needed their permission to exist. Instead, I just whispered, my voice carrying a quiet strength that surprised even me. Wait until you hear who really owned that land. The color drained from her face because she didn't know. None of them knew. And that was the beginning of their undoing. The next morning, I barely slept. My uniform from the diner still hung on the back of the chair in my temporary motel room, carrying that faint smell of grease and burnt coffee that I couldn't seem to scrub off my skin, no matter how many showers I took. But I didn't care. My mind wasn't on double shifts or aching feet anymore. It was on the fireproof envelope sitting on the dresser of my new temporary home, the one that my grandmother had insisted I keep safe all those months ago when she had sat me down with that knowing look in her eyes and told me that someday I would need it more than she ever had. By 9:30 a.m., I was already downtown, standing outside the courthouse that loomed over the city like some concrete fortress designed to intimidate the common people who came seeking justice. People rushed in and out, lawyers in sharp suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, clerks balancing files that contained the hopes and dreams of desperate people, a few nervous couples clutching paperwork that would determine the course of their futures. I stood there gripping the strap of my worn-out bag, my pulse drumming in my ears as I watched the entrance, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The weight of the envelope in my bag felt like a promise, like the key to a future I had almost given up hope of achieving. At 9:59, they arrived in a carefully orchestrated display of family unity that made my stomach churn. Amanda first, clicking down the sidewalk in heels that were too bright and too expensive for the occasion, still pretending this was some kind of performance where she was the star and everyone else was just background noise. Behind her came Mom and Dad, both dressed like they had just walked out of a country club brunch rather than being summoned to what would essentially be their financial funeral. And of course, Kyle trailed last, sleepy-eyed, yawning like he had been dragged out of bed for something as mundane as this legal proceeding, his sunglasses pushed up on his head like the sunlight was personally attacking him. The moment he saw me, Kyle's lip curled in that familiar expression of disdain that I had grown to both expect and despise over the years. Really, Riley? You dragged us all the way down here because you're jealous of a vacation? Come on. We all know you've never been anywhere exciting. Maybe you should just get over it and be happy for me. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack, forcing myself to stay calm despite the rage building in my chest like a storm about to break. No, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I dragged you here because you sold something you didn't own. Dad's lips pressed into a thin line, that familiar expression of barely contained anger that had been directed at me more times than I could count throughout my life. Stop this nonsense. We handled it, Riley. The house was ours to sell. End of story. Not quite, I said, pulling the envelope from my bag with hands that didn't even shake this time. I'd been waiting for this moment, had been preparing for it in my mind for months, ever since I had first discovered what my grandmother had left me. You sold the structure? Sure. But the land, the deed to the actual soil belongs to me. Grandma made sure of it. I laid the documents flat on the table inside the recorder's office, watching as their faces transformed from smug confidence to something approaching panic. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, glanced at the raised seal, then at my parents with the kind of expression that suggested she had seen this kind of family drama before. This was recorded last December, she said matter-of-factly, her voice carrying the weight of legal authority. Valid. An active leasehold interest consent clause. Yes, she's correct. Any sale without the landowner's signature is unenforceable. Amanda's face drained of color, that perfect composure she had always worn like armor beginning to crack under the pressure of reality. Mom stiffened, clutching her purse like someone had just told her it was fake, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the expensive leather as if she could somehow claw her way out of this situation. Dad's nostrils flared, but he didn't argue. The seal spoke louder than any excuse he might have tried to make. Kyle blinked, confused in that way that suggested he had never actually had to think about the consequences of his actions. Wait, so what does that mean? The money? The clerk adjusted her glasses and read aloud from the documents, her voice carrying the finality of legal truth. Any transfer made in violation of the consent clause shall result in the full net proceeds reverting to the landowner. She looked directly at me, her professional mask slipping for just a moment to show a flicker of what might have been respect. That's you. The silence that followed was so heavy. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on the room like a physical force. It was the kind of silence that settles over a space when everything you thought you knew about your life suddenly shifts, when the ground beneath your feet becomes unstable and you realize you've been living a lie. Amanda whispered, her voice barely audible. You're lying. But her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, revealing the fear that had been building beneath her carefully constructed facade. No, I said, steady as stone, feeling a strength I hadn't known I possessed, flowing through me. You sold the roof over my head, but Grandma made sure I'd always have the ground beneath my feet. That money you thought would send Kyle across Europe, it's mine now. Kyle's sunglasses slipped down his nose as his world began to crumble around him. You've got to be kidding me. I turned to face all of them, my voice sharper now, carrying every sleepless night, every double shift, every insult they'd thrown at me over the years like weapons designed to keep me in my place. You treated me like I was disposable, like my work didn't matter, like my life was less valuable than Kyle's endless vacations. But here's the truth. Grandma saw me. She trusted me. And now you'll see just how big of a mistake you made. For the first time in years, they weren't laughing, mocking, or sneering at me. They were silent because the one thing they valued most, money, had slipped straight through their fingers into mine like sand through their greedy grasp. And standing there, surrounded by the legal documents that proved my worth in black and white, I realized something I never thought I'd feel around them. Power, real, undeniable power that came not from their approval or their financial support, but from my own strength and the foresight of a woman who had seen me clearly when no one else could. The courthouse air still clung to my skin as I walked outside with the envelope pressed tight against my chest like a talisman. The sun had burned through the morning haze, casting long shadows across the concrete steps, but my parents and siblings stood in the shadow of the building, their faces twisted with disbelief and the dawning realization that their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. Amanda was the first to break the silence, her heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots in the quiet morning air. You set this up, didn't you? She hissed, her face twisted with a mixture of anger and fear that made her look almost human for once. You and Grandma plotting behind our backs. You knew about this all along. I met her glare without flinching, feeling the strength that had been building inside me for years finally manifest in my posture and my unwavering gaze. Of course, I knew. That's why I didn't fall apart when I saw movers clearing my house last night. You thought I'd just roll over, but Grandma didn't raise me to be stupid. She raised me to survive you. Amanda's jaw tightened, that familiar expression of barely contained rage that had been directed at me throughout our entire relationship. But before she could spit out another insult, Mom's voice cracked through the tension like a whip, her carefully maintained composure finally showing cracks. How dare you embarrass us like that, Riley? Her nails dug into the leather of her purse with such force I thought she might tear through it. You stood there in front of a clerk and humiliated this family. I actually laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that cut through her theatrics like a blade through silk. No, Mom. You humiliated yourselves when you forged ahead with a sale you didn't have the right to make. I didn't ruin your reputation. You did. That the second you signed papers without understanding what you were signing. Dad finally stepped forward, his face red with a mixture of anger and embarrassment, his voice sharp like the crack of a whip. You think you're clever, waving paperwork around like some kind of lawyer? Let me remind you, Riley, you wouldn't even have had that house if it weren't for us. We co-signed. We carried the risk. I squared my shoulders, meeting his glare head-on, with a confidence that surprised even me. And Grandma made sure you couldn't touch it when it mattered most. She knew what you'd try to do. She knew you'd always put Kyle first. That's why she locked you out legally and gave me the ground beneath the house. She didn't trust you and now you've proved her right, Kyle scoffed, tugging his sunglasses off and shoving them into his pocket with more force than necessary. So what, Riley? You've got the money now. Congratulations. You're still a waitress pulling double shifts. Do you really think owning some dirt makes you better than me? I turned toward him, feeling the weight of every night I had worked while he slept in, every dollar I had saved while he spent freely, every dream I had deferred while he lived his life without consequences. No, Kyle. What makes me better is that I work for what I have. I don't need mom and dad to rob other people to pay for my vacations. I don't need handouts. I've been surviving without your approval my whole life, and now I'll thrive without it. For a moment, his smug expression faltered, that carefully constructed mask of superiority cracking to reveal the scared, entitled young man he really was. A few people on the courthouse steps had stopped to watch, their curious glances flicking between us like spectators at a tennis match. It wasn't a private argument anymore. It was a public unraveling, a family drama playing out in broad daylight for anyone who cared to watch. My family, so obsessed with appearances, was being stripped bare right in front of strangers, their carefully maintained image of wealth and success crumbling like a house of cards in the wind. Amanda tugged on Mom's sleeve, whispering urgently in an attempt to salvage what was left of their dignity. Mom nodded, then tried to soften her tone like she always did when she wanted to manipulate me, switching from anger to what she probably thought was reasonableness. Listen, Riley, you've made your point, but think about what you're doing. This money, it was supposed to give Kyle opportunities. Don't you want your brother to have a future? Isn't family more important than money? My throat tightened, but not from doubt, from fury that built up like pressure in a volcano about to erupt. Family, I repeated, my voice rising with each word, carrying every moment of betrayal and dismissal I had endured. Family is what you use as a shield every time you betray me. Family didn't think twice about selling the roof over my head. Family laughed when I worked double shifts while Kyle slept in. Family told me I wasn't worth as much as a plane ticket to Europe. Don't stand there and lecture me about family when you've never treated me like part of one. The silence that followed was suffocating, the kind of silence that settles over a space when everything has been said and there are no more words to hide behind. I could see people whispering at the edge of the steps, their eyes wide with the kind of curiosity that feeds on drama. My parents hated gossip more than anything, and now they were the center of it, their reputation as successful, respectable people crumbling before the eyes of strangers. Amanda broke first, her voice sharp but shaky, the carefully maintained composure finally cracking completely. You'll regret this. You think you've won, but when the money runs out, you'll come crawling back. You always do. I stepped closer to her, so close she had to tilt her chin up to meet my eyes, feeling the power that came from standing tall for the first time in my life. No, Amanda, the crawling stops today. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For once, she was speechless, her carefully constructed arguments and manipulations rendered useless by the simple truth of what had happened. I turned and started walking down the courthouse steps, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand like a promise of better things to come. Behind me, their voices rose angry, panicked, desperate, but I didn't stop. Every step felt like a chain snapping off my back. Years of humiliation and betrayal falling away like dead weight I no longer needed to carry. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my phone buzzed with a message that would confirm everything I had suspected, but had been too afraid to hope for. A message from the escrow officer, funds released. Proceeds redirected to Hart Cornerland LLC. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the words on my screen, my hands trembling, not from fear or uncertainty, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing that it was real. The money they thought was Kyle's was mine, all of it. Every dollar they had stolen from me, every penny they had taken without permission, every financial opportunity they had denied me, was now sitting in an account that bore my name. For the first time in years, I smiled, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of sheer relief and the dawning realization that I was finally free. They had taken everything they thought I had tried to strip me of my dignity and my security. But Grandma had given me something they could never steal, and now I was finally free to build the life I had always deserved. What would you do in Riley's situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one.